Hello there everyone, your fluffy armchair Admiral Latur is back with some more hot ship action. In today's episode of Lots of Guns, we are going to take a look at the most difficult mission I've ever played in this game so far. It took me several attempts, well, several would be quite understatement. It took me tens or like it took me way too many attempts, I'd say, to actually be able to complete this mission successfully. And I really mean it. It was really nasty mission. So I hope you are prepared for today's show. Because today's mission, you can probably see on your screen right now, is called Prove Your Might. You could say it's pretty ordinary mission and quite easy. Well, for some people, perhaps it is. However, it presents some serious difficulties. First of all, your battle cruiser that you can see on your screen. I'm right now editing it, and yes, I am recording voice after I actually played this mission. So what I'm saying might not exactly be related to what is happening on the screen, and I will make a lot of cuts in today's video, because let's face it, I was absolutely unable to record this video live. It was actually the first video that forced me to record it this way. So it's also experimental way for me to actually record the video. Anyway, as you can see, I decided to change my strategy completely. At some point I decided to use smaller guns to improve my accuracy, and somewhat it worked. It wasn't the worst plan ever, however it was very ineffective, and enemy battleship very often gets equipped with 16 or 17-inch guns, and they absolutely devastated my armor. Mostly because this battle cruiser, as you will probably see at some point during this presentation, is very limited in terms of armor that I can put on it. I can't simply smack 30-inch of belt armor and be completely protected from any incoming shells. No. That would be too easy. So I think battle cruisers are limited to 17-inch armor, and in this case, even with Crab 4, it was very difficult. Anyway, what I was also trying to experiment is to put some secondary guns. However, as you probably noticed, I am pretty much at the weight limit with my design by putting those 17-inch single towers. And why did I put 3 of them? Well, the third one is to actually put some balance to this construction, because as you can probably also see, there's quite a lot of offset, 11.7% to be exact. So I was trying to put some heavy stuff on the back of the ship to actually improve the balance. However, I failed and decided to eventually get on with what I got. Was it a good idea? Well, perhaps it wasn't, perhaps it was. Eventually I decided, let's go for it. And right now on your screen you should be able to see the armors. As you can see, I can't add any more belt armor. This plus arrow, well, this plus button was grayed out. And that's pretty much how my build looked like. I eventually decided to begin the mission. So as it loads, let's give it a second. Yeah. So for this mission, you are receiving a help from 2 friendly destroyers. So eventually, oops, what was that noise? Perhaps 2 of those destroyers collided. Anyway, let's get back to our plan. So I decided, frick it, let's rush the enemy battleship. However, mission requires me to stay alive with my battlecruiser. It doesn't say the same thing about destroyers. So I am definitely going to use those destroyers to perform a torpedo attack on enemy battleship. However, that said battleship also has an escort, and he is escorted by a very, very nasty heavy cruiser, and that heavy cruiser has a bad tendency to prioritize those destroyers, because the game recognizes that, well, my battlecruiser is a no match against this battleship. However, my destroyers are still equipped with quite a big torpedoes, and if those hit, they actually deal some damage to this battleship, opposite to torpedoes that I can equip on my battlecruiser. They are absolutely useless, and you will see a direct comparison of the torpedoes that I can actually install on my battlecruiser and torpedoes that are equipped on board of enemy battleship, because we will have a little bit of a, well, exchange of our torpedo blows. And unfortunately I lost that exchange. I'm not going to lie. To prevent any spoilers, yes, in this battle I failed to sink that battleship eventually. It was still quite exciting battle. We did have a bit of a furious exchange. Anyway, fast forward to later point in the battle. As soon as I acquired a visual contact with the enemy, I began to execute my plan. That was to send my destroyers to the west, where enemy battleship was, and in the meantime I decided to send my battlecruiser towards enemy cruiser, because I really needed him gone. If he is around, he has a nasty habit of targeting my destroyers first, and I'm not gonna lie, they are equipped, or actually that heavy cruiser is equipped with some sort of laser guided shells, because they have a bad tendency to hit my destroyers and destroy them really fast. So I had to draw enemy cruiser into a fight with my battle cruiser and hopefully force him to retreat. And that was my first plan. But in order to do so, I first have to hit him. And that's not that easy. Fast forward to further moment into the battle, and as you can probably see, enemy cruiser is still intact. I haven't hit him once. However, what I managed to do is to identify him, and I realized that he is not equipped with a lot of torpedoes, and his main guns were just 6-inch, which gave me some tactical advantage. I had a knowledge, and now I had to figure out how to use it. I still wasn't able to identify battleship at that point, and I had to do that in order to decide if I should rush towards this cruiser and eventually reduce the distance in order to help my gunners to actually hit that cruiser. So at this point I tried to drag the cruiser away from the battleship and eventually avoid incoming torpedoes in order to force the cruiser to eventually run out of such. Because it's much safer to rush the target that can't fight back. And as soon as I started to do so, I identified enemy battleship, and I was really happy with what I discovered. First of all, his guns were of very small caliber and they didn't have large ammunition reserves. That gave me an idea. However, the only problem I had with enemy battleship at that point were those 22 torpedoes that were loaded. Those might have really mess up my plans, and eventually, as you will probably notice that later on in the video, they did. I failed to sink enemy battleship. However, I still succeeded in that mission. Anyway, fast forward to later point in this battle. As I said before, I kept running away from enemy cruiser and force him to spend his torpedo reserves. And as soon as I discovered that he is running very low, I decided to turn around and began to chase him. Because I really need to take him out of the battle, either by sinking him or by forcing him to retreat. So that's the point when I began to actually rush towards the enemy. And at one point you can probably notice, or at this point you can probably notice, that I just got informed that he in fact ran out. So that's a perfect moment. Let's begin to chase him. And I began to adjust my destroyer's position as well, because I need them to go around this heavy cruiser and get closer to enemy battleship. I really needed them to send those torpedoes and cripple enemy battleship, slow him down, and eventually allow me to disengage from the battle and leave him behind, because that was the main goal at this point. I didn't plan to sink enemy battleship because I didn't have accuracy to do so, and providing that he was equipped with the torpedoes, getting anywhere close to him was not the smartest of my ideas. However, I had to eventually take this course of action. Anyway, I kept trying, avoiding last two torpedoes of this enemy cruiser, and eventually I decided, okay, I'm getting too close to the battle, and I need to keep a little bit of a distance. So I have to stay close, but I also need to stay far away enough from enemy battleship, so that those 14-inch guns don't pose a huge threat to me. Because eventually, if you get close enough, even 14-inch guns could punch through my armor, and I didn't want that to happen. I really wanted enemy battleship to run out of ammunition by the point where I will engage him at a close distance. And as you can see, he's at 275 rounds at this point of the battle, which is very good. We still got 3 hours to go, and he's pretty much out of ammunition. He's shooting a salvo every like 10 or 15 seconds, so it's perfectly fine for me. I can pretty much kite him into firing all those shells into my bow armor, which is reinforced and will bounce pretty much everything that he can throw at me. So I was much more than happy with this outcome. Anyway, my mission still applies. I need to get rid of that pesky cruiser. So at this point, I began to further adjust the course of my destroyers. And here's what happens. I eventually managed to hit that cruiser. At one point, I eventually succeeded. So, you know what they used to say, throw enough crap on the wall and some of them will eventually stick. So I had to follow this advice that was given to everyone by one of the YouTubers in relation to one of his videos, or one of his videos where he featured different game about naval warfare. Anyway, with that success, it eventually triggered enemy cruiser into retreat, because he realized, okay, if this guy is going to hit me once more, it might end up really bad. With just one hit that I managed to score, and it took me pretty much 45 minutes to do so, I managed to destroy enemy's engine and pretty much eat a sixth of his health. So he definitely was not eager to fight with me anymore. I still kept my gunners firing at that cruiser in hopes for further hits and eventual critical hit that would put him down with his misery, and that would really help me a lot. Anyway, by this point I made a small mistake by sending my destroyers a little bit too close, which triggered enemy cruiser to actually fire at them and drove some fire away from Furious. Not that enemy cruiser could eventually punch through my armor. It would most likely annoy me with fires that it sets. Anyway, I had to stick to my plan. So I kept closing the distance, trying to bow tank anything that battleship is throwing at me, while at the same time I kept shooting at this cruiser. And as you can see, enemy fire started to cause some critical hits on me. They haven't done much damage. They actually destroyed modules. They damaged armor plates. They loosened them definitely. But my battleship, or my battle cruiser, was able to withstand whatever enemy was throwing at me. And at this point I realized that my destroyers are in pretty much good position to perform an attack on enemy battleship. So I ordered them to turn around in hopes for some torpedo hits. I also ordered them to fire first torpedo salvos. And again, while I was closing the distance to enemy battleship, it reminded me, hey, this dude has the torpedoes. And as soon as I controlled, as soon as I checked him, I realized, okay, he fired those torpedoes some time ago. So at this point I had to adjust my course, because I expected to find those torpedoes anytime soon. And yeah, I wasn't wrong. And in fact, you will see that on the video really soon, that I have spotted torpedoes really soon after that. Anyway, I had to keep adjusting my course and a little bit of a zigzag towards enemy, because I really needed to fire my own torpedoes. So I adjusted orders for my torpedo gunners in hopes for some torpedo hits on enemy battleship, and by that point I had half of my health gone with just 2 hits on enemy. I spent entire hour trying to fight with the enemy that I can't hit. Really, that's how badly balanced that mission is. I'm not going to lie. It's not a best balance for a mission design to do such thing. I was virtually helpless against enemy battleship throughout entire battle. Even at this short distance, what you can see, my gunners are unable to hit enemy battleship. I was so helpless. It felt so bad. I'm not going to lie. Bear in mind, enemy still has 16 torpedoes, and by this point he still has 63 shells in his magazines. And as you can see, as soon as I failed to angle correctly, he scored some hits and actually caused serious damage. So I had to take very risky course of action and rush towards him to eventually force his torpedo gunners to fire those and eventually try to avoid short-range torpedoes with a battle cruiser, which is not the greatest idea. But that was the best idea I had at this point. I also realized that out of 3 of my guns, only 1 of them is operational. What an astonishing success! That was absolutely fantastic news for me. To find out that I was reduced to 1/3 of my firepower. However, I was really lucky. I was happy to discover that my gunners finally started to hit something. Not that it made a lot of impression on enemy battleship, but it was still a massive success to see that pretty much an hour into the battle I had 3 scored hits on enemy vessels. That was absolutely fantastic. Anyway, at this point we began to pretty much exchange blows at a very short distance. It reminds me that video about Ironclad that I released like last week, where I mentioned that those 2 ships were exchanging blows for many hours without actually damaging each other, and that's pretty much the situation you are going to see in this video. We will pretty much exchange blows at a very short distance. At this point, enemy ran out of ammunition. I was able to maneuver a little bit more freely around him. I still had to keep my guard up because of that 14 torpedoes that he still had. And at one point of the battle, you will see that those torpedoes actually made a lot of a difference. Anyway, at this point, I focused more on my destroyers because I really wanted to put some torpedoes into that battleship. So I performed that one last torpedo attack attempt. I sent my destroyer a little bit too close, which triggered enemy to focus his secondaries on Kempert. But I still had to take my chances. Unfortunately, I discovered that Welland ran out of torpedoes without scoring any successful hit. Um, Probably it wasn't the best idea to leave him with aggressive torpedo setup. Anyway, the milk has been spilled. There's no reason to cry about it. I missed another torpedo attack, which was a lost chance, unfortunately. So I had to rely on what I got. So I decided, okay, fair enough. I got what I got. I can use Kempelfeld to perform that one last torpedo strike. And as you can see, he managed to unleash a torpedo attack at relatively short distance, which doesn't mean that it was a complete success. Even though I managed to fire 6 torpedoes at the enemy, in the meantime, a secondaries from this battleship managed to tear Kemperfeld apart. Not to mention that enemy battleship also retaliated using his own torpedoes, which was somewhat lucky because that spent a little bit of that torpedo reserves that wasn't eventually used against my battlecruiser. I still took a very risky action by passing right next to Kaiser Friedrich at a relatively short distance in this moment of the battle. If he would have fired 2 of his torpedoes on left side or starboard side, he would have definitely hit me. At this point, I managed to score another hit from my guns and sent another 2 torpedoes towards him. So you would say, yeah, you can win this. Well, yeah, that's what I felt at this point. I detonated his ammunition reserve. I managed to damage 2 of his engines. I managed to damage his rudder. He was on fire and flooding. But still, he was standing strong on his post, and what you will see right about now is how overpowered this ship actually is. I was absolutely unable to believe in what I have seen at this point. Pretty much with 2 engines damaged and active flooding, not to mention his rudder being destroyed, I expected enemy battleship to be less agile than it actually was. Anyway, I had to maneuver away because I expected enemy to fire his torpedoes. And I was really afraid to see that launch. And yes, I wasn't mistaken. Enemy in fact fired his own torpedoes. Thankfully, I anticipated that move and managed to give orders beforehand. So I successfully avoided those 2. In retaliation, I managed to fire my own torpedo, which unfortunately missed. And that's when a bit of a ridiculous moment in this battle happened. We began to basically run around each other. Obviously, Kaiser Friedrich was harassing me with his secondary gunfire, which was completely ineffective. Let's face it, he was equipped with 3-inch secondaries that were not able to punch through my armor at all. So I wasn't afraid about them. Even 6-inch secondaries were not able to cause enough damage to me. However, I was also unable to cause any damage to the enemy, even though I had 17-inch guns pointing at him, or actually a single 17-inch gun pointing at him. I was unable to position myself correctly to perform a proper torpedo attack, and even though I scored some hits throughout this exchange, I just couldn't finish off enemy battleship. Anyway, at this point I also thought, okay, he might have only port side torpedo launchers operational. So I decided, okay, so if I approach him from starport side, I might be able to freely fire my torpedo at a very short distance, and that's what I was hoping about. So I decided, okay, let's approach him from that side. Let's chase him, and what you can see is my fully operational battle cruiser at this point of time. My engines were fully operational at an optimal speed, which I have to mention, with only one funnel damaged, which definitely reduced my my top speed. I was unable, and I'm gonna repeat that, I was absolutely unable, or I was actually struggling to keep up with enemy battleship, who had 2 of his engine destroyed. That was the most ridiculous thing I've seen in that game. I do know that sometimes you're gonna get auxiliary engines. However, a ship that is moving with a speed of 22 knots, being unable to keep up with a battleship that's basically crawling, or that should be crawling, was a little bit over the top. Not to mention that my shots at this point were bouncing off enemy's armor, which I was expecting, because let's face it, he was angling away from me, so I wouldn't expect my gunners to be smart enough to hit, for example, a superstructure, to destroy like front and rear tower, to reduce enemy's ability to command his ship. Anyway, we kept exchanging those blows for quite a while. It took at least 10 minutes, I guess, before eventually we managed to perform our last and final exchange. Eventually, I managed to catch up with enemy battleship, or in fact, I started to catch up. In the meantime, I've sent my last remaining destroyer to further harass him. However, as you can probably see, it didn't make a lot of impression on him. I managed to score some low caliber hits on his superstructure. However, they didn't do any damage at all. However, in the meantime, my battlecruiser started to catch up with enemy battleship. I was very close at this point, and I decided, let's go for it. I'm about to like position myself exactly parallel to Kaiser Friedrich, so I can fire my torpedoes very soon. So I decided, let's go for it. Let's give it a shot. It either succeeds or it fails miserably. And yeah, you guessed it. It didn't turn out to be as successful as I expected it to be. I would call it a Pyrrhic victory, I guess. Yeah, that was one of my worst ideas ever in this game. So I had a clear advantage at this point, and I could have played it differently. I'm not gonna lie, but well, you can now see what I did. Yes, I did a very bad thing in here. So as soon as I positioned myself parallel, I fired my torpedoes. and they all hit. Unfortunately, to my great joy, I discovered that enemy also has his own torpedoes ready. And here's where another mistake came. I decided, okay, let's go for it. Let's do it. And my gunners failed. They absolutely missed the shot. And at this point I realized, okay, the guy still has more torpedoes. Even if I'm increasing the distance, he's about to reload them. And that was really bad. So I had to survive this one last shot. Unfortunately, my torpedoes wasn't ready by that time. And they wasn't ready at all, because they got destroyed, which I didn't realize. So by this point, my structure points went down to astonishing 4%. I was taking on water, and I ended up having all 3 of my engines damaged. How unfortunate that is. I nearly lost the battle that was already won. That's the scale of my mistake. So even though I still had 22 of my own torpedoes at that point, I was unable to continue fighting. Even secondaries had a chance to successfully reduce my health pool to 0, and at this point enemy was still at 50% structure. It was absolutely ridiculous. I managed to score 9 torpedo hits just on this single ship. So what I decided to do is to retreat towards my transport ships. And that was the final order I gave to my battle cruiser, in fact. Because by this point we broke a contact with the enemy. They were unable to chase after my transport ships, and all I had to do in order to win this mission is to survive and prevent enemy from destroying more than 30% of my transport ships. In fact, sinking enemy battleship is an optional goal. I clearly failed on that field, but I could still end up victorious in this battle. So I decided, let's take it. It's an easy victory. All I have to do is to wait up for 2 more hours. And so in the end, regardless of loss of 2 destroyers and pretty much heavy damage to my battlecruiser, I managed to successfully defend the convoy. And that was the main goal of my mission. So mission is completed. Even though I'm not fully satisfied with its outcome, I can't call it a complete loss. Regardless of that, well, you have to decide on your own what to think about this video. So, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you want to get informed about my new uploads, hit that notification bell button and don't forget to share your comments down below. Have a great day and see you all later. Later. Out.